This is Theeda Murphy, and we're going to have a conversation about rewilding religion. And Theeda, I want to have you start talking about your childhood religion, which was a fundamentalist religion.
I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. And even though Adventism, from what I can tell, has changed, when I was growing up, it was really strict. And they're not as strict now, but they still don't ordain women or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't fit for me because, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel, I didn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would go to church. I would go to Sabbath school, and I would listen to the sermons. I would try to do what they tell me to do. But when I started reading for myself and started reading Bible stories that they don't really talk about, and seeing that those were in there, it's like, well, this is very interesting. And what do I do with this? Because they say everything in this book is the Word of God, but nobody's talking about that.
Yeah, so we're picking out what we want the congregation to hear and know.
Yes.
And do you think patriarchy has anything to do with that?
Well, yeah, because a lot of those stories that they weren't telling were stories about women. like Dinah, you know. That whole story, when I first read it, I was like, that's what's in here. And they tell me not to read novels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
I'm like, whoa. And nobody was talking about that. And you read all the Levitical rules, and you're like, well, nobody talks about this either.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, it's amazing. So I started reading the Bible for myself and having questions about what I was reading and the conclusions that I was drawing from reading it and what I was hearing, from the pulpit and in my Sabbath school lessons and all that. And so I had a whole bunch of questions, which I learned, don't ask.
Yeah.
And then I started reading other things. Outside of different kinds of books about the books that were left out of the Bible, the Apocrypha, how that happened, and it just wasn't making sense.
Yeah. And then later, you went to college and met people from other parts of the world who were also Adventists.
I went to the Adventist college, the Black Adventist College, Oakwood in Huntsville. And my mother thought it was safe to send me there. But I started...
She didn't know you, did she?
No, she didn't. I started meeting Black people from all over the world, which was, amazing to me to have this whole range of people. For one thing, the diversity of cultures of what it means to be Black. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that blew my mind right there. And then all the people who were there, all of them were not raised Adventists like me. So the different cultures that they came in from, they came to Adventism in different ways. And so we would talk about that. And most of the students that I met from Africa and to a lesser extent from the Caribbean were aware of ancestral religions. like in Africa, they knew what their cultural religion was because a lot of the festivals or a lot of the rite of passages traditions are built into their culture. So they have that connection to their indigenous ancestral religion, even though having gone to the colonial schools, they looked down on that and felt that people who still practiced that was backwards. And the way to move forward was to embrace the European colonizers' religion, or in many cases they were also Muslim. But to be anything but what you were raised to be, because that is backwards. And it's even diabolical. So you know what it is, but you look down on it, and you're trying as hard as you can to get away from it.
But here you were with people from all over the world who supposedly practiced the same thing as you, except their culture was coming into it. And because of, different culture is going to bring a different sort of feel or tone to a religion. Where did you move from there? I mean, how did you start and end up on a journey that took you to where you are now?
So once I graduated from college and moved away from home, and out on my own, I always sought out people who were from other places and who were different. And so that even broadened my horizons more. I mean, talking to people who really weren't Christian, and understanding that these people were all good people. And so as I was raised to believe that anybody who wasn't Adventist, even if they were Christian, anybody who's not Adventist is going to hell. And that's such a small group of people, because Adventism still is not mainstream. So we're really talking about a small group of people. That's the majority of the world, really. And I just could not buy that the majority of the world is going to burn in hellfire. That's ridiculous.
So this, creator or creators, however we, conclude that, is going to make this beautiful planet.
Yeah.
And it's going to have people and plants and animals all over it. And yet there's going to be this one little group.
And they're the only group that has God's favor.
Right.
And that made no sense whatsoever. So that and learning more about ancestral religions and going to Africa and talking to people there, going to the slave castles, and realizing that type of violence that was done there, it wasn't just physical violence. It was violence on every level. That is what it took to make us Christians. That's what it took. And so I could no longer be Christian after that.
The term spiritual genocide just, popped into my head. And of course, a lot of people, a lot of cultures have been robbed of their language and their religion, everything that makes us essentially who we are, and wherever home is, we gather all that from there. And so no better way to destroy a people than to take away each of those pieces and of course, of who they are.
It was done intentionally because for any indigenous African spirituality across the context, they're very different, but the one thing they share is that strong connection to their ancestors. That's the one thing they share. That's the foundation for all of it. And to come and attack that is to attack a people's spirits. And that is the way they tried to break us. Unfortunately, what they didn't know is that our ancestors hold to their children very strongly.
Yeah.
And we found ways to keep our traditions alive and maintain our contact with our ancestors. And in the United States, I think that we are the group of Africans that are the least conscious of the ways in which we've done that. But it permeates our entire way of moving through the world. That when you travel as an African American to other cultures, you see it. You see that, okay, what they're doing here is very familiar to what we do. And we have no idea that we are doing the same thing that they're doing. We have no idea that we preserve that and we're still keeping it going.
And yet sometimes it's some of this stuff, it seems like it's kind of right under our nose. Well, you found a group of people who were practicing.
Yes, when I came back, after I'd gone to the slave castles and said, I can't be a Christian anymore, that's when I came back and found the community of people who were practicing, and started studying and learning more and more about tradition. But the main thing I understand, though, from learning from them is that the way we practice it now is not the same as the absolute traditional way. We make the modifications over here in what we do because our lives and our experience over here is different.
Yeah.
You know. And at this point, after so many generations over here, even our ancestral experience is different. So our rituals, the way we do things, it's modified in that way to meet our needs and to connect us with our specific ancestral experiences and our specific ancestors. It's my belief that's why traditionally so many of our traditions were passed down orally, because our traditions and our history are passed down orally, not because we were too stupid and couldn't write, but because that was a conscious decision. Because when you take the information and you embody it and you take it in internally, then it changes organically with whatever generation is telling the story, or to meet the needs of that generation. And it just happens, just like any other living thing adapts to its environment. Our traditions, our history, the way we tell it, the way we do the rituals, it changes organically and seamlessly, which is something that's just hard to do when things are written down. It becomes dead when it's written down. But when it is passed down, it is memorized and passed down orally, it remains alive because it becomes part of you.
And how many ever generations of ancestors there are that have, their life experience, you've got almost, it's like stacking the over hundreds of years. It's amazing to me that, that your ancestors were watching, and as people would cross over, there would be new information and old information, and it would all be brought to you, so that you could find the way that you need to worship for yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Not for anybody.
Exactly.
That would have, Yeah.
Yeah. And the human spirit is very resilient. And so we, as Africans in America, we really embody that resilience. I mean, everything that's been thrown at us has failed to kill us in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And whereas, we talk about what's wrong with our community and what isn't working, a lot of times we fail to see all the things that are working and continue to work.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great, and I have a feeling we'll have to come back and revisit this again.
That would be great.